get it started. A little slow.
Oh, there it goes.
So, all right. So, um, as a basic teaching, let us look at the words concentration that you brought up, because that seems to be an important quality of Western practices. Uh, but the word samadhi actually means gathering together the factors, and that an example would be an easy one would be an American teepee, American Indian teepee, has all of these poles, and at the bottom of the poles are stuck around, but at the top they are gathered to one point, a samadhi point. In the suttas, they talk about it in the sense of a tent or a yurt. You know what a yurt is, right?
A yurt. Yeah, I mean
Mongol,
it's
a Mongolian
yeah,
yurt.
it's like a
Okay,
leather.
it has a center pole, and then all of the other roofing poles are spaced around, but they all come together in the middle at that one point. That point is a samadhi point. It means to gather all of the factors together, and then they can rest on each other. That if you take a stick and put it in the air, or let us say you just put it in the ground straight up, that stick's going to fall. It's going to fall because of gravity.
So we have like the factors around the core,
Okay,
like
so you
pillar.
put two sticks together like this, and now they're stable this way, but they can still fall this way. But if you put a pole over here, now you can have a little triangle, and triangle are fairly stable, like a three cornered stool. But then you add a fourth leg, and now it's got even more stability. And so that's the way that we look at it, is that these factors we're bringing together actually help stabilize the situation. Now, there are several places where we use the word samadhi, and in the Eightfold Noble Path, it's used in the following way. That sama area samadhi can actually be understood as unification of mind. When all of the factors of the mind come together in unity, now the mind is unified. So let me give you some examples of how a mind would not be unified. Doubt. If there's any doubt, is it this or is it that, will help tear up the mind. We're staying in a state of confusion or in doubt. That's not a comfortable place to be in.
So it would be like a state of knowing as opposed to doubt,
A
or like a
state of knowing that
unification.
you don't know, which is a
Okay,
whole
knowing
lot
that
of
you don't
better
know. It's
state
different than confusion.
than don't know that you don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I guess I don't understand that difference between like knowing that you don't know and confusion, but I mean over time.
Well, no, not knowing that you don't know is delusion, denial.
Okay. So
You think you know, but you
thinking you
don't.
know.
You're
Gotcha.
wrong. Okay. So you don't know that you don't know.
And I guess there'd be like the other form of don't know where you're like kind of pulling your hair out and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on.
I don't know what is going on. Confusion.
Confusion. Okay, that'd be more of a confusion. Yeah.
And if in a state of confusion, that would keep the mind from being unified.
And so
Okay.
is unified like a rare state for people, or is that?
Most people are scattered. Most people are a crowd. Most people will go from one feeling to the next feeling to the next feeling, and they don't even know that they're not the same person. Do you see, we have a mistaken idea about what personality is. That everybody kind of thinks that their personality is set. This is, in fact, the whole belief system about rebirth is what is it that's reborn? And it has to do with various elements of the personality. But when we dig deep into that personality, we recognize there's really no self in there anywhere. But
Yeah.
that's the
So
good
like,
news, because the good news is that not only is the personality fluid, and it can be changed, but that not only is it possible to be changed, it's been changing all along, and people haven't been noticing it.
Okay, that makes sense. It's already flexible. It's just kind of bouncing around. It's in like an ununified state. It's like, oh, there's anger. Oh, there's confusion.
Exactly. But when we come to a unified state, then we will find basically uh, a very, very narrow range of feelings.
A narrow range of feelings,
A
like the
narrow range of feelings that go from joy to more joy and a little less joy.
so a unified mind would be like free of, well, like greed, anger, or like kind of those baser, like
Free from suffering,
free
precisely.
from suffering. Okay.
Yeah, free from dukkha in all forms. So,
Mm.
another way of saying that a mind would be ununified is when we would be lying. If we lie to somebody about something, or if we lie to ourselves about something, that means that we know what's real and we don't like it. We're not unified with it. We're trying to separate ourselves from the truth. We don't like the truth. And so we're not in a state of unification when we're lying.
Since you brought up lying, like, can a unified mind like do harm or like do bad, I guess? Or
Actually, the way that we're talking about it, um, there is always unintentional consequences,
yeah, like
but
unforeseen consequences, like,
unforeseen consequences. The military would call it collateral damage.
but you wouldn't say like willingly steal from somebody or
Right.
like
Wouldn't take
willingly
anything
harm
if your
somebody.
mind is exactly. Yeah, that's one of the examples. If your mind is unified and you're a state of homeostasis, if you're in a state of satisfaction, then you don't want anything. So if you want something you don't have and you want it bad enough that you're willing to steal it to get it, that's certainly not a unified mind.
Okay, so yeah, it's not like that you were just free of emotions. There's like a certain quality to that. Or like yeah, I'm not too clear, or like my thoughts aren't too clear on that. It's not exactly just that you are like free of the like mortal coil or like and that you're free to do whatever you want. There are some things that you would like not want to partake in, like in a unified mind state. Do you kind of see where I'm coming from?
Yes, let's say it this way, and that is that the human being is not always human in the sense of using the highest quality or the best part of the human mind or the human brain. That most people are lazy and so they live instinctually. They follow their heart rather than figuring out what's supposed to be done. So you have the wisdom versus emotion, and most people live their lives emotionally. Emotions can be easily manipulated, and so people, because they live their lives emotionally, they're easily manipulated, and that they live their lives emotionally because they haven't woken up to use wisdom to figure out what's the right way to go. So as we gain wisdom, we begin to not destroy the instincts and the emotions out of the instincts, rather we begin to overpower them and make them friends and pets. We're not going, so we can think of that we've got a really wild dog that barks and bites and does all kinds of things. We don't want to kill the dog, we want to tame the dog.
Is that kind of a reflection of like you brought up friendship earlier? So there's like external friendship among like people,
Now we're talking about internal friendship.
and then internal friendship with like I guess all the parts that we generally kind of consider make up our personality.
Hmm. And so
Okay,
by
yeah.
making friends with that stuff and taking power over it, that means that we are no longer overpowered with anger. I am angry means that there's a person, a self there that is part of the package. I am angry. But we can separate ourselves out through right practice of Anapanasati, which we'll talk about it a great deal later, and say, aha, I see you, anger. I am not the anger. The anger is just a feeling, but I am not that anger. You see, but most people, when they're angry, they say, I am angry, and they think that that's part of their personality.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely fall into that trap. Or maybe not, yeah, but
Okay.
yeah, where like you identify with, the parts that kind of, or like not the parts, but like, yeah, you identify with the emotions that come through most often.
Uh-huh. So if every motion is around and every emotion has enough power to gain control, then each time that we feel a different way, we're a different person and there's no unification there.
Yeah, or sorry, I missed that last part. Where like if we're pulled, there's no unification if we're like being pulled between the emotions. Is that what you said?
Yes, uh-huh.
Yes, gotcha.
So I'm greedy, and that's one feeling that pulls me out of unification of mind. I'm angry, and that pulls me out of the unification of mind. Or I'm lying, and that pulls me out of unification of mind. And so I'm giving you all of the various ways of looking at it from a negative position of what is not organization of mind so that we can now begin to understand how we bring about this unification of mind. And so this sutta that I'm speaking of starts off with the Buddha saying, listen closely, monks, I'm going to teach you right unification of mind with its supports and requisites. Now, basically, what I mean by requisites can be thought of in two ways, and that is prerequisites or postrequisites. And I'm going to look at it more kind of as postrequisites. And so, to divide the Eightfold Noble Path out, we start with right view, right sati, right effort, and right attitude. And when we bring these things together, that brings about unification of mind. Once the mind is completely unified, then one will naturally abstain from doing things that would be listed as part of the precepts. In other words, if I don't hate or I'm angry at anyone, then I'm not going to harm them. If I don't want anything, I'm not going to steal from them. If I can understand that a girl is beautiful and she really worked hard to be beautiful, but I don't want her, then I'm unlikely to cause her husband grief. But if I want her, now he's going to get jealous, never mind how close to her I actually get. But if we don't want anything, then we can stay at our state of unification of mind. So this is the way that we look at the precepts, not from the bottom up, but these are a set of rules that you've got to keep in order to be a good Buddhist. We're looking at it from the perspective of once you do have the teaching of the Buddha in mind, you will naturally abstain from those things.
Okay, yeah, I guess like I've been kind of thinking of it a little wrong, or a little sideways, where it's like, okay, you follow the five precepts in order to like cultivate that mind, but it's really kind of the opposite. You do these things,
See,
and then like
actually, the
the
opposite
baggage
of
kind
that.
of, yeah.
And there are many, many opposites within the teachings of the Buddha from the Western Buddhism that has sprung up.
Mm.
And this is one of them. But you can see, in fact, that a society has to teach its children because children are not wise enough to see for themselves what is right behavior. And so they're given a list of rules. The children are given a list of rules, but we would hope by the time that they grow up, they don't need any rules anymore because they have wisdom to see how to live correctly.
So is there sort of like a meeting in the middle there where like, the kids grow up like
I
under
would,
these rules, but then they kind of realize through their own, sorry, what are you saying?
it would be a gradual process to come out of doing things because there's a rule for it into doing things because wisdom indicates that this is the right way to live.
Are you saying that it requires both approaches? So like, for example, I like eating pizza and like, but I know that kind of, hurts me physically to eat pizza all the time.
Well, let us say it this way: is giving children a set of rules and guidance will help society. I'm not sure how valuable it is for the child himself.
Okay.
But we give kids rules because we don't want to have to suffer the consequences of them not following our rules.
Yeah, it'd be kind of hard to have a lot of unruly kids running around.
You can't teach them in school. You got to tell them, you shut up, you sit down, and you pay attention to what's going on, or I'm going to find somebody to do something to you that you won't like. I'm going to tell your parents, or I'm going to take you to the office, or something, you know. So always the idea of punishment is built into it for not keeping the rules. Basically, what it means is it all has to do with the law of karma. Good actions give good results, and bad actions give bad results. That's what we're taught, right? But the Buddha is a little more wise than that. He recognizes, oh no, that may not be the only kind of actions there are. But this is the way that we teach the kids is that I don't like your action, therefore I claim that it's a bad action, and now I'm going to give you a spanking so that you experience the results of your bad action. But I'm the one who labeled it as a bad action.
Mm.
Okay, so there's always with this good and bad some sort of authority out there someplace. And so basically what we're looking at is to let's find a method so that we can see really what's going on rather than merely following a set of rules that someone else has given us.
Sure.
This is basically what's really happening is we need to find out for sure what's going on, and that the following the Eightfold Noble Path then is a method to do this. Because the first part of the path, or the first point, or the first step of the Eightfold Noble, of the Four Noble Truths, is to recognize that there is dissatisfaction, and there's a cause for this dissatisfaction. But there's also a state where we are not in a state of dissatisfaction, that we're kind of good to go. That happens throughout our lives. When we're kids, we feel generally good most of the time. By the time we're adults, we're in dukkha, or we're in a state of dissatisfaction, probably 80, 90% of the time. Some people are in dissatisfaction 100% of the time, and when they do, they get no peace, no rest. These are the kind of guys that wind up being deep inside the jail or in solitary confinement, or they're CEOs of companies who have a heart attack or a stroke early. They're just driven and driven and driven and driven to the point of death. But most people, almost everyone, in fact, does have a few moments every day where they can relax. People relax when they're having a meal. They actually enjoy it. Or we can relax it by having entertainment, by taking our mind off of our own lives by watching some movie or something. And so we can become distracted from our own suffering, and we can come into a state of natural joy, laughter. But then when the movie's over, we go right back into all of the stuff like leaving the movie theater and driving home and all of that kind of stuff. And so we naturally will move back and forth between a state of satisfaction and unsatisfaction. But too much time we spend in a state of being dissatisfied. So, right view, then, when we start talking about the Eightfold Noble Path itself, is right view is to understand these Four Noble Truths and understand that we, in fact, can come out of it. That's one's right view in the beginning. But as we grow and mature in the Dhamma, the right view will grow and expand. An example of that is like there is a movie called Cool Hand Luke, where Luke escapes from the penitentiary that's in the swamps of Louisiana, and he's running away, and they get the bloodhounds after him. And you know, the bloodhounds, they can travel the scent. They can go with their nose back and forth with what is called stereoscopic odor. detection, they can follow the path. They can figure out where the guy goes. But that movie was done back in the 1960s. If they did that movie today, the warden would just get his drone out and go look around and say, "Oh, there he is," right? This is one's right view: is to get our mind off of the ground and get a higher view of things. So if you're in a meeting, each individual person in that meeting normally sees that meeting from their own perspective, their own point of view. And because of that, if you've got 10 people in a meeting, that means that there's probably 10 or 11 realities. Each individual one has their own viewpoint of what happened in that meeting, and then you have the TV camera recording of actually what happened in the meeting. Normally we don't have that. Normally all we have is everyone's own opinion, which is based upon a very narrow frame of work or frame of view, their normal viewpoint, which is not noble, it's ordinary. And so we'll talk about views a little bit later, but I'm trying to give you kind of an overall idea of right view, right sati. Sati is the main one. This is the one that we have to spend the most time with. This is the skill that's the most important. Why? Because if we don't have sati, then we can't do any of the other things. What is sati? To remember, to wake up, to come awake, so that we can see what's going on. Once we become awake, now we can do something about it, like taking right effort. And the right effort then would be to come out of that state of dukkha. And once we come out of that state of dukkha, then we have the right attitude. I can come out of dukkha. I can be satisfied. Because very few people have that attitude. Most people have the attitude of being a victim, the attitude of a loser, the attitude of, for instance, I am angry, means that the anger is important.
So I was thinking, so it's like right view, right effort, then right,
Sati.
sati.
That's
Sati.
the word sati that I'm giving you is the word that's been wrongly translated into English as mindfulness.
Okay, and sati is our ability to wake up and kind of see things as they are.
And to see things as they are, to wake up.
And then there's right perception, which is on the other side of that. Or is that what, did you say right perception?
Perception is not a part of the Eightfold Noble Path directly.
Okay, so there was, so right view, sati.
Right view. Right sati.
Okay, right sati.
View. And right sati means to wake up, to see what's going on, followed then by right effort.
Attitude. Oh, right effort, okay.
Right effort. The effort is, in fact, to throw the dukkha out of the mind and also to take a deep breath. Now, within the Mahasi method, and I think that there is some reason, in fact, I'll go ahead and let you in on it. There is an injunction that monks cannot tell laymen what level of attainment that they have. That's just a taboo. There are several reasons for it, and one of them is that if the lay people think that a monk is better than other monks, then they're more than likely to give him more donations than the others, which is causing a bit of a problem. So if all the monks are seen to be the same, then everybody is willing to generate or be generous to all the monks. So if a monk is actually bad, we don't even want to tell the parents, because they would become embarrassed and drag him out of the Sangha, and in fact 6 months from now he may be a really excellent monk. So we don't want to tell the problems of monks. In fact, the whole quality of the Sangha is to come out of our mentality of punishment for doing wrong, because that's just a human being saying that, well, I'm going to make sure that the law of karma exists, and I see you've done something wrong, therefore I'm going to punish you. Okay, and this is the whole system of our prisons. Our prisons in the United States have nothing to do with rehabilitation and everything to do with punishment. But the Dhamma is all about rehabilitation. If we've done something wrong, we recognize that we've done something wrong, and we make a strong determination, I'm not going to do that anymore. That's the right education. But if you, like a criminal, if he's a burglar and you put him in jail, and when he gets out, he doesn't know anything to do except go back and be a burglar again. And so you have that same repeating thing over and over again. How can they rehabilitate him so that he's no longer a burglar? Well, for one thing, you don't want to put him in prison, because if he's in prison, he's in with all the other burglars. He's just going to learn how to be a better burglar in prison.
Yeah, yeah, he's gonna have the same like worldview as everybody else in there.
Right, exactly. So the Dhamma is, let's rehabilitate the mind. Let's find out what the problems actually are and then fix them directly. This is what right effort is really all about.
It's
One's
how you
wrong effort is
rehabilitating
what
it. Sorry,
rehab.
like the right effort's like how we rehabilitate the mind, like kind of that
Yes,
prisoner that's like used to doing wrong.
yes, exactly. Now this actually does require a full waking up. I started to teach this way because of various things that I've seen with students, and that is, when you wake up in the morning and you get, and when you first wake up, you generally don't get right out of bed. You generally, when you wake up in the morning, you either reset the snooze alarm or whatever, and you roll over and you kind of go back to bed, right? Only later do you fully wake up enough to where you have now the energy or the effort to actually get up out of bed. That happens every morning, right?
Yeah, it's every morning,
Yeah,
pretty
so
much
in
to a
fact,
T.
what we're talking about is, even in physical awake and sleep and awake, it's a process.
It's not like
It's
an
not
on
like
or off
we,
switch. It's
yeah,
kind
it's
of
not an on and
it's a
off switch.
scale.
It's on a dial, I guess, is the way of talking about it. Well, sati in meditation operates the same way. That many times students will wake up, but they won't wake up completely. They'll only wake up enough to know that they're in dukkha. They'll only wake up enough to know that there it is. And so this is what gives rise to the idea that uh, it's okay to watch the dukkha. I think that that's the reason that that has become popular as an idea in the West, is because the, the, the really good meditation teachers don't actually teach the jhanas correctly, because if they teach the first jhana correctly, then that's an indication that that teacher knows that first jhana, which is now kind of breaking the taboo. But there's a difference between saying, I know first jhana and I will teach you first jhana, is completely different than listen closely and we'll discuss first jhana, because that's the right approach. But deep inside the student's mind is going to say, well, if I'm going to trust this guy to talk about first jhana, I assume that he knows first jhana. This is part of the reason why the jhanas then are not taught to lay people. But it's a technicality. That in fact, the first jhana is the path. So when students hear about the jhanas, they start reading and listening to people who haven't really, it's more like an intellectual topic now. And some people even say that jhanas haven't been done for centuries and nobody's been enlightened for centuries and all of that kind of stuff. And it has a little bit to do with this quality of the taboo, that it's only within the Sangha that this stuff is allowed to be taught. But Bhikkhu Buddhadasa says, no, now it's time to let this stuff out of the bag. Let's not keep it quiet anymore. It's time for the world to know the actual teachings of the Buddha, which we call the supramundane Dhamma. What we mean by supramundane, the Pali word means loka tara. Loka is the world, and Tara is above the world. To come out of the world of feelings and into the world, basically coming out of the world of the animals and the society of the human animal into being fully human.
So it's that ability to like step into right view.
Precisely, or not step into, but rather develop right
Develop
view.
right view. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. And then so the jhanas, you don't. So you're saying you don't say like this is like the step-by-step guide to get to jhanas, because doesn't work. You
Well,
more
it's not
kind of like talk about.
necessarily a step by step, but it does have the quality of gathering the factors together.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, just like there are four factors gathered together to make the unified mind in the Eightfold Noble Path of right view, right sati, right effort, and right attitude, come bring this together. The way that we practice that is by bringing the mind into first jhana, because that in first jhana the mind is organized.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, if we have all of the factors of first jhana, then the mind is in first jhana, and that means that the mind is now unified and fit for work. So, the way that we get to this first jhana is through these four factors of right view, right sati, right effort, and right attitude. These are key points, and they're all skills to be developed. Now, the method that we're going to use is called Anapanasati. And here is how that basically goes. Is that we have these four foundations of mindfulness: the body, the feeling, the mind, and the mind objects. And that this is all about training or becoming friends with or learning how to influence and control these four elements. So basically, what we're doing now is we're going to start using the breath as an object of the body, because the first thing that we're going to learn to control is the breathing. And yet, in the Mahasi method and in others, I'm not sure about TMI, they don't spend a lot of time talking about how important it is to learn to control the breath. But in the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha talks specifically about it in the sense of making sure that you know it's an in-breath on a long in-breath, and to make sure that you know that it's an out while you're doing a long out-breath. Now, this long in-breath and this long out-breath actually is not 100% filling up and 100% depleting, but it's an easy, comfortable breath that you could say goes somewhere. Most people, I would say, would be going between 40 to 60% in their normal shallow breathing. That when they breathe out, they only go down to about 40, and when they breathe in, they only breathe in to about 60% of capacity. We're going to change that from like 30 to 80.
Okay, so
That's all we're
slightly
going to
bigger
do.
than normal, like we're instead
Right.
of like 40 to 60, it's more like 30 to 80.
Mm-hmm.
And
But
I
you're not
guess
going to go up to 100 to try to top it off. Okay, it's like
don't
going
go
to
up
a
to
gas
100.
station, to fill up your car, and once the bump comes off, a lot of people will shake their car and then try to get a little bit more gas, especially if it's really cheap gas. Then we try to top it up. Got to get the air out of the tank so that we can get another quart of gasoline. And
Is it a deliberate breath? As in like, okay, it
this is
is deliberate.
deliberate, but it's not deliberately topping it up. It's just deliberately
Gotcha.
making sure that you're getting a long, nice, deep in-breath.
Okay. Yeah.
And that it's a controlled breath, controlled, long, deep breath. Here's the reason for that, by the way, that if you're watching the breath in a normal way and the breathing is normal, it's actually still being controlled by the reptilian brain. That the brain has two ways of controlling the breath or operating the breath. One is through back in the back of the brain, fairly close to where the heart is controlled. The breathing is controlled naturally. If the reptilian brain was not doing this job, then every human being would die during the night. They'd stop breathing. right? But we continue to breathe in the night, but we generally don't breathe very well, and it's shallow. You could think of it, in fact, that the reptilian brain is really lazy, and that we also have issues of flight and fright, which has the quality also of freezing, that when there's any fear, we tend to shut down our breathing. So now we're going to intentionally bring that breathing back up to a higher level, a more noble, normal level, so that we can uh, make the mind fit for work. We want to actually energize the body, even to the point that the body begins to tingle. You can feel it. Okay, so you're going to make sure that you can breathe really well so that you can get a good full uh, exchange of air. When we breathe in oxygen. And when we breathe in over a period of time with several good deep breaths, then that means that the blood now has more oxygen level in it. And also, when we're breathing out, we throw out pollutions. One of the pollutions, the more primary pollution, is carbon dioxide. You probably know, by the way, that carbon dioxide and water mix together form a carbonic acid. They call it acid rain.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. So it's like kind of changing the balance of the gases.
Right. So by breathing in and out deeper, we're actually changing the pH levels of the blood.
That's really,
And
yeah,
also, go ahead.
that's kind of like the opposite of what I've been doing. I've been trying to like kind of background the breath and kind of just watch it kind of very neutrally. So yeah, that's very interesting. I can't wait to try that out.
Yes, this is Anapanasati, though. This is not the practice that is normally taught. And not only that, but people who read books are not likely then. The book, for instance, is not going to say, hey, now that you're on page 80, you should be reading page 4 right now. You're on the wrong page of the book.
Hmm.
Books don't do that.
Yeah.
Books don't set us on fire. They don't give us real inspiration about how to practice. And so that's one of the problems with reading Dhamma books. And a lot of students will spend huge amounts of time during the day reading all of these Dhamma books without doing correct practice, or actually without ever being around anyone who actually knows the Dhamma.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely been there.
Okay, so now that we're looking at the breathing, you can also see that just taking these long, deep breaths intentionally has a number of benefits. The one that I was about to mention is that on the out breath, not only is it carbon dioxide that's thrown out, but it's other pollutions. The breakdown of amino acids. They've even come to understand that sometimes people have kidney problems simply because they're not breathing well,
Mm.
which means that the kidneys now have to do all the work that the lungs should have been doing all along of purifying the blood. But if we're breathing well, then the kidneys don't have so much work to do, because a lot of the stuff that's coming out through the kidneys would now go right out of the body. Tiny little bits of amino acids and other things like that that are basically the breakdown of adrenaline, cortisol, and other harmful chemicals that are in the body. And yet, whenever we have feelings of fear or anger, there's going to be a certain amount of leakage of these kind of chemicals into the bloodstream. So by taking good, long, deep breaths, we're actually throwing some of that stuff out. This is one of the
Yeah.
reasons why anxiety can be easily dealt with through deep breathing. Because anxiety is a tension that we have inside that's based upon blood and all that kind of stuff. So by deep breathing and breathing into that area of the body, that anxiety can be released.
Mm.
Okay. So the next point about waking up, sati, to wake up completely, means that now we have the ability to do right effort. The right effort then is the effort to actually get out of bed, rather than just merely waking up and thinking, oh, I'm going to stay in bed for a while. Because this is exactly the way that people practice, in the sense that they wake up enough so that they can investigate and see what's in the mind, and so that they can know dukkha. They can see it. Before it was there and they don't see it. Sometimes we wake up, we have sati, and wake up to the fact that there's no hindrance, that I'm good to go. But that doesn't happen a lot. Most of the time, there's kind of junk thoughts or things in there. And so this waking up has to be strong enough so that we can actually take the effort of getting out of it, just like we take the effort to get out of bed. This is what we mean by right effort, to take that effort to throw out of the mind those thoughts that would be considered hindrances because they're hindering us from being in a pleasant state of mind.
Okay, so we wake up, then we're able to kind of see the hindrances, and then we use what power we have to kind of weed them out.
Now the Buddha gave a let us say a little phrase for that he started to use when he was under the Bo tree right after he decided not to do self-flagellation and starving himself and doing those kind of things, because that didn't work any better than jhana did. And so he started to eat, and when he started to eat, his companions that were with him took a hike. They left. They just said, I don't want anything to do with him anymore. He's not practicing anymore. He's gotten fat. Well, if he was really thin because he was starving himself, it wouldn't have taken very many meals for him to start putting on weight, and they could see it right away that he's getting fat. I mean, if he had let us say a 12-inch waist, and he's gone to a 14 or 15-inch waist, then they can see that. All right. Now, by the way, nobody has that kind of waist. I remember in Gone with the Wind that Charlotte O'Hara was really unhappy because she couldn't get it back down to 20 inches, a 20-inch waist, because she'd had a baby and it was at 21. So we're talking about that when people are at this level of thinness, it's really easy to see when they start putting on weight.
Oh, so like the Buddha was thin. He was like a very thin person, but they could tell that he'd been gaining weight over some time, and they're like,
and then he started
we're done with
gaining
this.
weight
We're
really
just gonna
quickly.
Okay, dang.
And so they left him. And so after he gained his strength back, he's on his own now, and what he does is he finds a very desperate, what they would in those days call a spooky, a haunted, but in our frame of reference we would call it a dangerous place. A place where few people go, and that's the why he chose Bodh Gaya, which was very close to where he was anyway. And it was there in this dangerous place where he sat for probably about 6 weeks, and in that time is when he put together and figured out the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Noble Path. He had already been doing Anapanasati for quite a while anyway, but that he began to understand how to put it together. And that the way that they were doing that was be one phrase that the Buddha had, and that is, Aha, I see you, Mara. Now, Mara here is used in the sense of, it can be defined as the world or as devil, but here we're using it in the sense of mental conditions that are not conducive to being in a good state, okay, the hindrances. So when he says, Aha, I see you, Mara, he's saying, Aha, I see you, hindrance. I see you, junk thought. I see you, anger. I see you, fear. I see you thinking about an argument that you had with someone. Okay, I see the past. I see the future. Aha, I see what's going on in the mind. This is what we mean by sati, is to fully wake up and to see what's going on. But that fully waking up, and not only to see what's going on, but to recognize that that is dukkha. Now, some people will say, okay, yes, I'm going to see the dukkha. I'm going to say dukkha. I see dukkha. I'm going to learn from dukkha. I've got insight from dukkha. I'm looking at the dukkha. I see what I'm doing. I understand it over and over and over again. And that would mean that the Buddha does not teach dukkha, dukkha, nirodha. He just teaches dukkha. Dukkha, 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 dukkha. Watch closely. Here's the dukkha now. Do you see it? Gain some insight. Here's dukkha. This is not the teaching of the Buddha. The Buddha is teaching dukkha, dukkha nirodha. When you see the dukkha, come out of it immediately. Aha, I see you, Myra, is a statement that is not Myra. It's an aha, I see you, Myra. It's a different thought. That's actually a liberating thought. So we have Myra, 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 Myra. Aha, I see you, Myra. It's a wake up. We wake up and we see that that stuff is actually dangerous. We wake up and recognize that that thought's a hindrance. It hinders me from being in the state of mind that I would actually prefer to be in. In other words, it boils down to this. Do you want to live your life the way that you have been living it, in the ordinary way that you were taught by all the other people, and so you live that kind of life that is actually driven by emotions that become the boss? Your choice from that, which is the old karma, is to make a change, to say, no, I'm going to feel the way that I want to feel. I'm going to think the way I want to think. This is basically your choice. Are you going to go for dukkha or dukkha nirodha? And you have that choice every minute, every second. All you have to do is see that you've got the choice. You can wake up out of it. You don't have to feel that.
Okay. So I guess the difference there, so it's kind of that aha moment. It's not A
Uh-huh.
being like, yes, like I observe the suffering. It's like, oh, there's suffering. Like I can choose not to be in, like I can choose not to embody that. Or
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know, there's something I don't quite get about, like, it seems like they're almost,
So this is
you're,
the
he's in right view, so he can kind of see it as like not quite a part of, well, I don't want to say themselves, but yeah, kind of like that, I guess. I don't know. I'm kind
yes.
of lost, but yeah.
Well, now let's understand then that when we see the dukkha, our job right now in this absolute present moment is to throw that stuff out. But by seeing it, we've already started to throw it out. If we actually see it and then taking the right effort. And so, right effort has two qualities. One is to start taking the long, deep breaths, and the other one would be to throw the hindrances out and to feel the relief. Wow, I'm glad I don't have to think about Aunt Susie right now.
Okay, so like I'd be going through my life in the normal mode that everybody does, some suffering would arise, or like I don't know, anxiety. I'd be blasted with anxiety. And so I would be, aha, anxiety, like I see you.
I,
I
I
would
can see you.
I can see you, as opposed to just being like, oh dang, I'm really anxious today. I'm just gonna live with this, and like hopefully tomorrow's better.
Right, because now you're living with it, and hopefully tomorrow is better. Is the way that you've been living your whole life already anyway.
And so the effort there is like deciding not to be entangled in that and taking the deep
Precisely.
breaths, choosing a
Aha, I
different
see
path.
you. I'm out of here. I am not that anxiety.
And like I guess the Anapanasati, that's kind of like us being able to cultivate the ability to do that and say, I
Precisely.
can see you fully.
Everything about Anapanasati is, in fact, skill development. That's the actual verb on each one of the 16 steps. Basically, what I mean is that the Satipatthana, four elements, each has four steps of Anapanasati with each one of them. So there's four elements with the breathing, there's four elements with feeling, there are four elements with mind, there are four elements with mental objects. The first thing that we want to know about mental objects is this hindrance or not? Later, we'll work with mental objects in the sense of what's really worth having thoughts about. What is worth having the mind focused on?
So there are mental objects that aren't hindrances.
Yes.
Okay.
What another way of saying it, that people think that the word attachment has to do with Buddhism, to don't attach to anything. The Buddha says no. We actually only have four modes of clinging. That there are many things that we actually do want to attach to.
Oh, really? Oh, so clinging's different than attachment.
Right. because attachments may be, in other words, if you're on a bus, you want to kind of attach yourself to the seat. You don't
Yeah.
want every time that the bus moves that you're just all over the place.
Yeah, it would not be a
Okay.
fun bus ride.
Okay. Another way that you would want to attach yourself is to this present moment, to be here now, to keep coming back, to attach ourselves to this present moment.
Oh,
Another
okay.
way would be the way is to look at it to attach ourselves to the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path, or to attach ourselves to correct breathing. Okay, so we have to
Okay. Yeah.
understand that the four modes of clinging have to do with these four modes of clinging bring on suffering. In fact, we just talked about that in the sense that clinging will bring on these woeful states of anger, wanting things we don't have, doing what we're told to do without hope for a reward, or all dressed up for battle, but afraid to go into battle, all dressed up and no place to go. And that's basically what we mean by frozen in fear, that we become afraid. We got, get locked up. It's like the child who is well rehearsed, he knows his lines, but when he walks out on stage, he freezes. He's forgotten everything, right? This is the state of asura, is that we get lost. We're full of fear, full of trepidation. We don't know where to go. And you've been in that state before many times,
Hmm.
even with the clicker on the television, and you don't know which station to go to.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the state that I'd be shooting for would be one where, like, I guess more a knowing state of like knowing the path forward, as opposed to being like, I don't know where to go.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Or better still, to drop where we got to go and be satisfied with where
Oh,
we are.
yeah. It's like I guess I threw in some seeking in there, where it's like there's still some driving, but like kind of the recognition that I don't have to go towards the, the, uh, sorry, I forget the word that you mentioned, but yeah, you don't have to go towards that like anxiety or the fear or the confusion.
Hmm. Okay. So now let's investigate a little bit more about one's right effort. One's right effort then has twofold. One is to start taking long, deep breaths. The other effort is to throw the hindrances out, and we actually are throwing them out when we make that statement, "Aha, I see you, anger," or "Aha, I see you, wandering thought." This is actually separating ourselves from it. Or another way to look at it is that this is a new thought. The old thought was, I'm going to tell Susie all about what we didn't argue with. I'm finished my argument with Susie. And they say, wake up, wait a minute. I see that argument with Susie. I don't have to have that argument with Susie right now. I'm sitting here just enjoying my moment.
So this is the right action. It's kind of like diverting
We've
from
changed.
going
We
back into the
can't throw
cycle.
right. If the mind itself is already capable of changing from thought to thought to thought, Freud called this free association. That we have one thought and then we have another thought and then we have another thought, but we don't intentionally decide I'm going to have this kind of thought. But now we are. Now we're going to take the effort that I'm going to start controlling the kind of thoughts that I have. And that the first kind of thought that I'm going to have is going to be, let's get the hindrances out. And now I'm going to have thoughts about this present moment, including thoughts about the breathing, thoughts about the body, thoughts about what is the rising and the falling, what is the touch of the cloth, how do I feel the air around. In other words, we begin to get fully more in touch with the body itself by watching the breathing, and we become much more knowledgeable about the body. Also, by thinking about the body, we're in fact thinking about the here now. When we're thinking about the breathing, we're not thinking about last month's breath or next year's breath. We're thinking about this breath right now in this present moment. To come back to this present moment is basically what the practice of Anapanasati is all about, is to come out of the hindrances, the past, the future, out of restlessness, worry, doubt, wanting things, or hating things, or even the last one would be the dull mind. Because we can come out of dull mind. The main reason for people having a dull mind is either it's one, gotten very tired because you've been doing something for a long time, but more than likely it's because you haven't gotten enough air. And if you start breathing deeply, then that drowsiness and dullness can be removed by watching the breathing and taking deep breaths. So now that we're beginning to get this change of mind, we can add in step 10 of Anapanasati. Now, before I add step 10, I'd like to at least go over what we've been doing with step 9, which is that sati, to wake up and to see what the mind is doing. To wake up and know the kind of thoughts that we're having, to know the kind of feelings we're having, and to see what's going on. This is sati, to wake up fully to it. And then we change it. This is actually a change, an activity. You could go so far as to say, well, if we're going in the direction of non-doing, why don't we just go in the direction of non-doing? Which means once I wake up to these thoughts, why should I do anything about them? Why don't I just sit there and watch these thoughts? Which means to stay in hindrance. But the Buddha talks about it in another way. He says, no, we're talking about action that leads to the end of action, rather than just hoping that the action will just sort of exhaust itself on its own.
So it's like kind of going back to the elimination of suffering versus just watching the
We're
suffering.
actually going
There's
to
like an
grab
action
it
that
and
we can take.
throw it out. It's not going to say, aha, I see you suffering, and I'm going to keep watching you until you die.
Okay, sorry, I'm a little slow. I got you said there was 10 steps. I guess like I didn't catch the numbers on like 1 through 8. I thought it was just like
10? Oh, yes. Okay, so we've been talking about step 9. This is the way that it goes. 4 for the body, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 for the feelings, 5, 6, 7, 8. Step 9 is the first step of the mind. When we first wake up at step 9, fully waking up, that means that we actually note and experience the state of mind that we're in. Is the mind in hindrance or is it not in hindrance? Is it bright? Is it dull? Is it sharp? Is it focused? Is it fit for work? Or is it drowsy? In other words, we're beginning to evaluate the state of mind that we're in. This is actually an investigation.
so it was 4 for body, 4 for feelings, 1 for mind, and now we're getting to
No, 4 for mind, 9,
4 for
10,
mind.
11, and 12, and
Okay.
then 4 for mind's objects, 13, 14, 15, and 16.
Okay.
Okay? So step 9 is the first thing that happens, though, and that's sati, to wake up and look at what you're doing. The next step is step 10, is to gladden the mind. This is, aha, I see you, Myra. Aha, I see you, Mr. Wondering Thought. Because that aha is actually a change of our mood from being in the suffering into waking up into a kind of joy. That we're gladdening the mind. Aha, I can see you.
Yeah,
Is a whole
okay.
lot better than, gosh, I'm stuck in it.
Yeah, it's like there's space between you and that.
Disassociation, precisely. That before we were associated with the thought. I am the thought. I am the feeling. Now, aha, I see you feeling, aha, I see you thought, is a kind of a disassociation. Before we were selfish. Now we are not selfish. Why? When I say, aha, I see you, Myra, that means I am not in the Myra. I am not Myra. I've come out of it. One is selfish, the other one is not selfish. When we wake up, we can see that the thoughts that I was having were selfish thoughts, like anger. How can we be angry if we're not selfish?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so you're not you're no longer embodying the anger or like that, I don't
Right,
know, that
but we can
feeling.
still see it, but we recognize I am not
You
that.
can see it for what it is, like you have that
Pre-
view. where you can see it
And to see
accurately
it for what
and
it
clearly.
is means, and we don't want it here. This is not me.
Now, like when you say we don't want it here, I don't know. So do
You
we
want
kick
to
it
be
out,
angry.
or do we want it? Do we like ask it out, or do we just befriend it,
Well,
or like what's
we
the
want to throw it out.
throw it out? Okay,
We
so
want
we
to
just
breathe
let it.
it out.
Okay,
We want to make sure that it goes out. And we can do that with a new kind of language. In other words, if we talked ourselves into getting angry, then we can talk ourselves into getting out of being angry. You could also go so far as to say we could use metta at that one point in time by saying, well, I really hope that my argument with Susie didn't harm her. I hope that she's going to be okay. I really don't want to harm Susie. I'm just having angry thoughts about Susie.
so I guess like our effort there to kick it out would be kind of the antidote to that particular.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah,
Having
like
an antidote, a new thought that you can begin to control your thoughts, just like we're learning to control the breath. And that basically the first or the intermediate goal here would be to be able to control your thoughts so that you have wholesome, valuable, useful, wise thoughts. And we can avoid the hindering, problematic, bad feeling thoughts. And we begin to look, what kind of thoughts am I having? Am I having thoughts that are free from suffering, or am I having thoughts that are associated with being dissatisfied?
in so in order to be able to like kind of apply that and able to like kind of switch from having like more positive thoughts or like weeding out the bad thoughts, we need
Hmm.
to be able to step into this proper view and this proper attitude to be able to actually for like communicate with these parts, the things that we don't want to be there, to be able to like talk to them. Because like I know personally, like if I just try to sit here and talk myself out of a bad feeling, that doesn't work. But there's like kind of the prerequisites to be able to
Oh, but you
communicate.
can't. How do you know you can't talk yourself out of a bad feeling?
um I
Normally,
mean, I
when
don't.
we're in bad feelings, we just keep talking to ourselves about the bad feelings rather than talking ourselves out of the bad feelings. Like with metta, of saying to ourselves, well, I really don't want to have an argument with Susie. I want our relationship to be nice. I really like Susie. There's no reason to argue with her. If we have to start having those kind of thoughts, those are different thoughts than the thoughts that we're having about, um, Susie, you're wrong about that. I got to tell you what is good. You know, this is the being stuck in it, but now we're having thoughts of coming out of it. You can talk yourself out of feeling bad.
So you would say like, okay, if I feel like there's something that I'm particularly stuck on, it's kind of my belief that I'm stuck on that, or like it's my inability to see the way
When
out.
you say stuck, you're talking about a time frame over a long period of time. Stuck and stuck and stuck and stuck and stuck. Okay. Let's not look at it that way. Let's look at it as what's happening in this instant, in this very
Okay.
moment.
I gotcha. Yeah. So you're right. Yeah. In like the moment, you're right.
In,
And so I
in
guess what
this
I'm
instant.
talking about is the reoccurrence. I'm not really talking about it existing for a long time. But yeah, yeah, I can talk myself. I can be like, oh, well, like, yeah, Susie, I'd rather just talk about like, the football game or something, as opposed to like bringing up all the gossip and whatnot.
Exactly. All right. So if we now that you recognize that, because that's sometimes hard for students to recognize that they can, in fact, change what they're thinking about. And by changing what they're thinking about, by changing the topic, they change their entire mood.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, there's it definitely possible. Yeah, it's kind of weird to notice that, yeah, I'm kind of like yeah, like the things that they arise and they go out of my attention like very quickly. And when I say that I'm stuck on something, I'm really not talking about it just being there forever. I'm just talking about it popping up more often.
Well, you're beginning to wake up to the fact that it pops up often. So the better you wake up, the more often you're going to see it pop up. But the idea then is that, oh no, things are getting worse. The more I meditate, the more bad problems I'm seeing.
Yeah, it's
But
felt
it's
like
the
that.
other way
Yeah.
around, that the more sati we have and the more often we wake up to it, then the more we're going to see it. It's not the dukkha increasing because our practice is increasing, it's that our knowledge of the dukkha is increasing.
Okay. Yeah. Dang, that's really it's interesting because I mean, yeah, that's
Oh,
kind
they know
of
all about it in the Goenka retreats, even 50 years ago or 40 years ago when I was practicing with Goenka, that they knew it then. The story is that on the first day, students come in and they sit down, and their job is, or their instruction is to watch the breath. And if the mind wanders away from the breath, never mind, start again. Come back with a mind that's clearer and focused and sharp, etc., like that. That whole spiel that Goenka gives. Um, on the first day, the student may see the mind wandering away from the breath 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times during that first hour, or the first each hour for the first few days. But by the time he's been practicing 6 days or more, now he sees the mind wandering away from the breath 50, 60, 70 times during that hour. And so now the student says, oh, monkey mind. I'm beginning to realize how monkey mind it is. Well, the monkey mind is not changing. What's really changing is the fact that you're waking up to this monkey mind.
dang, yeah, that's really interesting. I definitely went through a period of time where it just felt like, my practice isn't like I can just see all the, harm that I'm doing. I don't know, for like yeah, it's just
Uh,
like everything is like was just much more keen to pick up all the bad things I was doing. It's like, dang, this is like not really helping me.
hmm So imagine that there is a store that keeps losing inventory, but they don't know why. But they only notice from time to time that was there before, and now it's not there. It's something has happened. But then they post a guard. And now the guard is going to be watching, so that if any thieves sneak into the store, they're going to be caught. Okay? Now we're going to start catching a lot of this shoplifting or a lot of this thievery because we're guarding for it.
Because you're
In the
more, yeah, you're
beginning, we
more awake
weren't
to
we
it.
weren't watching; it was just happening, and we weren't paying much attention. Or when we began, but later, let's say that guard is, as he's keeping his job, he's actually gaining skill, so that now he's a really great guard.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Okay. So this is where we're going with it is to recognize that we will see these things coming back and recurring, but we already know that we can catch it one time and throw it out. We can catch it again and throw it out. And we can catch it again and throw it out. So that we eventually come to the conclusion it doesn't matter how obstructed or how often obstructed the mind becomes, I can still throw it out and bring myself back to a nice, pleasant state.
Yeah,
That's
like the
one that's a major point, and we'll talk about it later. This is the first step of the path. The first knowledge is no matter how obstructed the mind is, I can throw that stuff out and come back to a state of seeing how things are right now, to see things the way they really are.
hmm,
This is actually part of a sutta. This is the first knowledge that is super mundane, it is noble, it's a factor of the path, and it is not held by ordinary people. Most ordinary people, in fact, do not have that deep knowledge that they can straighten out any problem that they have. No, look at all the professions that cater to people who do not think that they can solve their own problems. The cosmetic industry, all right? They sell products to ladies so that the ladies can feel better about the way they look.
yeah. I mean, yeah, there's a
So the
million
ladies
industries
are
just like
buying
that.
cosmetics because they don't know how to feel good about the way they look without the cosmetics. But you also see the clothing industry, especially the sports clothing industry. and all of that, because people are wanting things from the outside, expecting that the cosmetics, the clothing, the alcohol, the doctor, the psychologist, everybody is going to help me. Even religion. Taking Jesus as my Savior and then I'll be saved, right? Okay? People have the idea they can't fix it themselves. This is basically the second noble truth. The second noble truth is you got yourself into this mess, you can get yourself back out of it.
There's an end to suffering.
The end of suffering. You got yourself into suffering, you can get yourself out of it. Actually, I prefer the word unsatisfactory or dissatisfying as opposed to suffering. In fact, you can see that suffering is a Christian's definition of the word dukkha.
Yeah, I mean, I think satisfaction makes more sense.
We're going to hang you up on a cross, That's suffering.
Yeah.
But if you go around telling people that they're suffering, you can wave a book in the air and says, "I got some Dhamma. I can help you from all your suffering." And then people will say, "I'm not suffering. I don't need your book. I don't need your Dhamma." But if you can talk to people that will all admit that, yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff in my life that I'm unsatisfied with. I'm unsatisfied with politics. I'm unsatisfied with my clothing. I'm unsatisfied with my job. I'm unsatisfied with my wife. I'm unsatisfied with my car. I'm unsatisfied with my kids, and on and on and on it goes. But they're never suffering. They're just dissatisfied with everything. So that's the problem with the definition and using the word suffering. Whenever you use the word suffering, you have to, it's better for you to go back and think of the word dukkha, means merely just being dissatisfied, a little bit of dissatisfaction.
Yeah, everybody looks at you a little weird when you say suffering too many times too. So yeah, dissatisfaction.
Okay.
Yeah, it just seems to make more sense.
Just like the word suffering and concentration are two words that are way out of bounds for what we're actually practicing here. These are wrong translations. By the way, my favorite is bowl.
Bowl? As far as wrong translations go?
Yeah, it's the wrong translation. In fact, it's the most stupid of all. Of all of the wrong translation. Well, you see on a Catholic table, the altar, they will have a bowl. Bowl is a sacrament or an object of sacrament. And a bowl is shaped in a way that the flanges, the edges go out, and that the design is to have a lot of room for the bowl to to be used by cooling food. Also, a bowl, the way that a bowl is used is normally it's set down in front of you. You pour food, the soup or whatever, into the bowl. You let it cool. You eat the bowl. You eat the bowl of food, and you leave the bowl where it was. That's the way that we use a bowl. The opposite of that is the word pot. And what is a pot? A pot is something that you cook in, or you keep it. It's got a flange lid that goes up like this, so that, or a flange top lip, so that you can put a lid on it. Monks carry a pot. They don't carry a bowl.
Why not? Or because it's meant to receive things?
Physically, it's a pot.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's got a lid.
It's not a bowl.
Okay.
A bowl would be hard for them to use. A bowl is generally shallow. A pot is normally deep.
What do they need the pot for?
To carry food. And actually, when they're off on Bendabat, they use it to gather food. But when they're on walkabout, when they're on Tudong, then they'll carry in the pot everything they own.
Oh, no way. I didn't know they did that. So like the monks, as they're traveling, they carry around the pot, and then that contains all their...
There's only 3 months a year that the monks stay in one place. Other than that, they're just all over the place. Yeah. Going from teacher to teacher and from wat to wat and all kinds of stuff like that. That's the tradition not only in Thailand and all over the Buddhist world, but it's also true of the Asian Buddhist in America, of about the 300 watts that I know of. They all, not everyone knows everyone, but there's a huge network of friendships and communities. The abbots of the Lao Wat will know the abbots of the Thai Wats and all of that kind of stuff. It's very, very deeply friendship connection oriented.
And do they travel around?
Wow.
Where do they stay at? I'm sorry, what
At
did you say?
wherever they're going.
They walk wherever so they walk to
Let us say
other
if someone was going to
lots?
be traveling by car from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles, then along the way they would stop and spend the night at a particular temple, and they'll have it all arranged in advance. And so the 4 nights that they need to spend on the road would be at 4 different new Watts that they go and
Oh, wow.
stay at night.
Dang, they've got to be really busy walking around, for 9 months out of the year.
Right. So back to the point, not about the bowl, but just that the translations of many of the words are misleading.
Yeah.
Monk. Bhikkhus are not monks. Mechis are
How,
not nuns.
how so? I mean, I guess like I'd just consider a monk
Well,
somebody who's kind of an expert, or like somebody who's an ascetic.
right. Well, the monks that I know of in Christianity, they basically have a schedule, not only a schedule of what's to learn, but a schedule of what to do during the daytime. That everybody works at a certain time and whatnot like that. But within the Bhikkhu tradition, it's just forest dwellers. There's not a lot to do. So there's not a lot of arrangement of time. It's a complete freedom, to where the Christian monastics are really locked down.
Yeah, it's probably stick to a pretty strict schedule.
Yeah. To where the bhikkhus are not.
Dang, that's really interesting. So they're kind of free to do what they want to do. What I heard you say, like, I don't know, some podcasts where like most of their time's unaccounted for. Like, I guess you're obligated to do lunch or like some sort of meal or something, but most of the
Yeah.
rest of the time is.
When I was in the United States and the people would ask, what do you do all day? I said, well, the only thing I do regularly is lunch.
And so how do you get advice? Like, I guess you would just talk with the other monks, or like if you're having
Yeah.
a particular trouble, and I mean, I guess everybody's around.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yes, because it's all a network of friends. It's a network of noble friends.
That's nice. Or that's yeah, it's a wonderful sentiment. It's really nice.
Well, we need to bring that to the West. That's the thing that's missing, is that noble friendship.
Yeah, I would definitely love to see that.
Well, that's one of the things that we're beginning to do with Spud. So you've got already something going for you by being in it in Seattle.
Yeah, I'll have to check them out. That's really exciting.
Okay. Noah is one to get to know, and Eric and Jim. These are guys that you'll want to get to know. I'll send you Skype links for all three of them.
Great. Yeah.
So back to the point,
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
and that is, with right effort to change the mind, to gladden the mind, we begin to also now work with the second tetrad, which is Vedana, the feelings, because we begin to feel good. If we can, in fact, bring the mind out of the dukkha, out of the hindrances, by saying, aha, I see you, Mara, then that means now the mind is free to start doing things that are more wholesome. And so at this level, we look at two Pali words. One is piti, and the other one is sukha. The word
Okay.
sukha is the exact opposite of the word dukkha. This is true in the Pali language, it's true in the Thai language, and it's also true in Gujarat. I just found out that a student says, yeah, that's right. Sukhi and dukkha are, in Gujarat language, opposites of one another. One is dissatisfaction and the other one is satisfaction. So, in order to be free from dissatisfaction, we want to cultivate satisfaction. Satisfaction is actually step 6 of Anapanasati Sutta.
Satisfaction, step 6?
Satisfaction, sukhi, or sukha, which means it's translated wrongly as just pleasure. But a much better way of looking at it would be the following. One is the state of sukha has the quality of safety, security, it has the quality of satisfaction, it has the quality of success, and it has the quality of contentment, almost to the point of satiation.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean by the word satiation?
Like kind of like satisfied. It's like you don't need anything else.
Completely satisfied, like a bucket that is overflowing. You keep putting water, you turn the faucet on and it fills and it fills and it fills, and now all the water that you put in flows out because the bucket is completely satiated. It's completely full up.
Yeah, there's no space left.
Right. There's no place for dukkha left because all we've got there is satisfaction. This is what we mean by satiation. Now, this is actually a skill to be developed.
Oh, okay. So you can cultivate sukha?
This is something that's to be cultivated. Well, you cultivated dukkha. You've been cultivating dukkha your whole life. Now we're going to start cultivating the opposite of that. We're going to actually build the skill of satisfaction. The next one is step 5 of Anapanasati is what's called piti, or rapture. Now, what we mean by piti, and by the word, the English language word rapture is probably about the worst of all the translations. I don't even know what the word rapture means.
Yeah, it sounds kind of spooky.
But the word piti actually means the feeling of success, the feelings of I can do it, the feeling of the winner. Remember when I was talking about the first knowledge of no matter how obstructed the mind gets, that I can throw it out. That's that knowledge that I can do. That's the piti. That and you can think of it as
like a full
winner's mentality. Huh?
Okay. It's like a full confidence. It's like like
confidence.
The knowing that you can
knowing that you can do it. Exactly.
And so you can cultivate sukha and piti? Yes. Okay.
They are to be cultivated. In fact, let's look at them together. Let's look at what piti and sukha have in common. One of the things they have in common is safety and security. It also has satisfaction. But piti has a whole lot more quality of success, or the winner's quality. So an example then you could say is that piti and sukha are in fact the same thing. It just is a matter of how much energy there is to it, because piti is exuberant. It is full on. It is energetic, to where sukha is more of relax.
Is that kind of like, well, piti would be kind of like, I think you mentioned in the Summit interview, like the lion attitude, or like...
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, like I can kind of understand how a lion might feel. Yeah,
a winner. Confidence.
Yeah, I get that distinction that you're getting at. It's like, one's like this, what relaxation, sukha is more like this relaxation, like satiation, like good, wholesome feeling, and then you have the like confident, like lionish kind of, I'm able to cast out dukkha, like that confidence.
Okay, so let me give you 2 examples in the real world. Yes, you've got it. 2 examples in the real world. One is on the football field One team makes a score. They make a touchdown, and for the people who are following that team, they will stand in up, raise their arms in the air and cheer. Yay! Okay. And after they do that for 10 or 15 seconds, then they'll sit down on the bleacher. They'll probably look at each other with a smile, or maybe they'll look at the scoreboard and feel really satisfied. Okay, so that touchdown sparked off both piti and sukha. Another example, on New Year's Eve in many cities, especially in New York, they have the dropping of the ball. And everybody counts 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. And then at that particular moment, when it goes down to zero in the new year, everybody starts to cheer. They jump up and down. They are in a state of piti. But then, within 10 or 15 seconds, then someone will start playing the song Auld Lang Syne. We'll all hug together and rock back and forth in the joy of the new year. So piti and sukha are there at the football game, and they're there at that point in time of the dropping of the ball. And you'll see that it's, in fact, that sequence is there often, and we want to bring that sequence into our practice.
And are these like, this is kind of a vague question. These aren't particularly feelings. They're more like qualities, right?
They have feeling.
They do have feelings. Okay.
They do have feeling. Yes, these people who are jumping up and down because of that score, they feel it.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. So there's a feeling that it, like to these states,
a feeling of success, a feeling of joy.
Okay.
The kind of feelings that we don't even register very much because our humanity has set it up so that the kind of feelings that we normally talk about and express and know are feelings like sadness, fear, anger, grief. Those are the kind of feelings that we normally associate with feelings.
Okay. So
because those are the feelings we don't have any control over. But we also have the positive kind of feelings, the things that we really like, in the sense of success and satisfaction. Okay, so these are the feelings that we're intentionally cultivating, and we do that with thought. And the thoughts that we have of, wow, I see you, Myra. Aha, I don't have to feel that way at all. I can sit here and take a deep breath and sigh and relax.
Gotcha. Yeah. So thanks for clarifying that. That makes sense. These are feelings that we can cultivate. And these things we'll be replacing like anger, greed, like hatred, those things with like piti and sukha.
Precisely.
By our like constant diligence of like weeding out what shouldn't be in our mind. Okay.
Let us not use the word constant. Let's use the word consistent.
Consistent. Okay.
Because constancy gives people the idea of perfection, which gives them the idea, if I catch myself feeling bad, I should feel bad about that too.
Yeah, there's like kind of an element of seeking in there too, where you're like, oh, I got to be diligent, but this is an attainable thing, something that I can do in my lifetime. Yeah.
And we intentionally practice sati. We intentionally practice to wake up, to keep waking up, because without the sati, we can't take right effort. Okay. Well, now let's look at it from the perspective of right attitude, because attitude also is a feeling. The feeling normally is the feeling of being a loser, of needing help, of being one down, of being in a state of dissatisfaction. And there's also a feeling of winner, the feeling of success, the feeling of I can do this, the feeling of a winner, the feeling of the champion. This is a feeling that can be cultivated. In fact, throughout your life, many times you've had the feeling of being really successful, but not many. And you didn't really go to cultivate that feeling. Yeah. But there have been high points in your life, memorable times. you can also recognize, well, if you felt that way before, you can feel that way again. So it may be an idea that's useful to recollect back in the past, in the childhood, for what times was it when you felt really big joy. Because there's going to be a few of them that you remember.
Yeah.
There's going to be real successes that we have. I had a big success in high school one time, and I remember that. Okay, so we
And
can
so,
remember those really big successes.
hmm,
By doing so, we can cultivate that as a feeling so that we can cultivate piti, we can cultivate sukha, we can remember that I don't have to feel bad right now, I can feel good instead. It's your choice. Instead of feeling the way that you're in the habit of feeling, you can feel the way that you want to feel. That's basically the entire teachings of the Buddha, dukkha or dukkha nirodha.
and this is all through Anapanasati.
All through Anapanasati, we've been talking about the deep breath
So,
of step 1, noticing
okay.
the body, step 3. We've also been talking about piti, which is step 5. We've been talking about sukha, which is step 6. I'll get into the other steps later. We've also started to talk about step 9 and step 10. Step 9 is sati, or waking up, seeing what the mind is doing. Step 10 is actually gladdening the mind. But by gladdening the mind, we also are free from the hindrances, and that's freedom of mind. That's step 10.
Hmm.
And then later, and it doesn't take much time, is when I say later, it's a sequence of events, not a time horizon, years from now, but rather the next step is step 12, which would then be unification of mind. Part of
Yeah.
Anapanasati and the Eightfold Noble Path. They're very closely, deeply related, the Eightfold Noble Path and the practice of Anapanasati. That in fact you could say that to practice the Eightfold Noble Path, we do Anapanasati, but Anapanasati is for the fulfillment of the Satipatthana. And the fulfillment of the Satipatthana then is the Sambhojana, the 7 factors of enlightenment. But the 7 factors of enlightenment are nothing more than the Eightfold Noble Path in fulfillment. In other words, it's a method that we practice, but when we have those practices done, then they become enlightenment factors.
Okay.
And so the Eightfold Noble Path and the 7 factors of enlightenment are the same thing. One is looking at it from the student's point of view, and the other one is looking at it from the master's point of view.
It's like two sides of the same coin. It's like after you've done the journey, you can see the other side.
Exactly. And so we practice the Eightfold Noble Path to do Anapanasati. We practice Anapanasati for the fulfillment of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. We also practice the 4 foundations of mindfulness for the fulfillment of the 7 factors of enlightenment, which is actually now the fulfillment of the Eightfold Noble Path.
Mhm.
And that leads us then to knowledge and deliverance, or knowledge and freedom. Now, knowledge comes first. Knowledge would be the knowledge of how to come out of suffering. And once we have the knowledge and the skills of how to come out of suffering, then we can actually be delivered from the suffering.
And delivered from the suffering, is that nibbana?
We've been having nibbanas all along, little nibbanas.
Okay,
The
little
word
nibbanas.
nibbana
Okay.
only means cool.
Cool? Oh,
Cool.
okay. Like a cooling. Yeah, cool.
Like
As
taking the
in,
fire, taking your food out of the fire, and then the food will nibbana a little before you eat it. You want to eat it warm, but you don't want to eat it when it's really hot. You want to let it cool off some. And that
yeah,
some foods are better eaten cold.
okay. I mean, yeah, I guess like there's like a kind of heat quality, well, not a heat quality, but like there's a anger and things like that. And it's like bouncing around a lot. And so like when they cool down, they tend to like go away. So it's like that kind of cool.
Right, okay.
Is that
Another
what you're
way that they used nibbana in the time of the Buddha was to nibbana a wild animal like a dog. A vicious wild dog that barks and it bites and everything versus a dog that's laying on the porch just cool. Okay, the
So it's
training
not
of the
like
dog.
it's not a like single place or like single, it's not like a heaven realm or anything. It's like a
That's
description.
magic. That's magical thinking. We haven't actually talked about the word magic, but most of Western Buddhism is magical thinking.
Hmm.
Most of Asian Buddhism is magical thinking. But within Western Buddhism is almost all magical thinking, to where in Thailand there are the nobles who do know the real teachings of the Buddha.
Okay, and so
And so
the
it's
nibbana
within
that.
that, it's within the ordinary mindset that they put Nibbana way up in there out of sight. Just like they put the Enlightenment way up there out of sight. You know, our culture does that because of Christianity, that we put God way up there someplace rather than God right here. We
Hmm.
put Jesus way up there. He's the Savior, you know. He's in heaven and he's going to come back to earth someday, but no time soon. Okay, this is the idea. And when we have that as part of our culture and learn about Buddhism, we begin to do with Buddhism what people have been doing for 2,000 years with Christianity, which is putting it out of reach. They want it out of reach for Christians because they don't want Christians to solve their own problems. They want them to keep contributing money to the church.
Hmm. And so like, I guess going back to the point, there's like you said, there's the knowledge, and then there's the what was the next one, like the fruition or the
Well, knowledge and deliverance. The word deliverance
deliverance.
would be a better word, would be freedom
Okay.
or moksha. So let's look at the word enlightenment for just a bit. The word enlightenment is actually a fairly good word to use once we understand it,
Hmm.
because there's in fact two different kinds of light. The word enlightenment means light is the key word in there. There's two kinds of light. One is to turn the lights on, light
Hmm.
of day. Uh, um, Enlightening means generally at this level is to wake up, to have knowledge, to see what's going on. So sati would be a form of enlightenment all on its own. But then the other kind of enlightenment is the enlightenment of not heavy. That once we see the burden and we cut it loose, now we're have two kinds of enlightenment. One is we saw it, and two, we're free of it.
Hmm.
This is what enlightenment means. It's not a magical word way up there.
It's not like a
That
magical state that if I meditate enough or get enough meditation points, then I'll
then
like
you'll get it
suddenly
eventually right. But
ascend and
the
become a
Zen
guru. Yeah.
people are absolutely correct. You're already enlightened. You're enlightened now.
In that I'm being like illuminated, or not illuminated, but like in that I am like,
You're already good enough. Just enjoy it.
yeah. No, yeah, I mean that resonates. I get what you're saying there. That's that was something kind of like that was um a lot of the, I don't know, Advaita Vedanta, if that's the right word, people kind of say like their first thing that they get to is like everybody's already enlightened. Um, but I guess are you saying like that we have the ability to see these things? There's nothing special about enlightenment.
Not
It's
only
like
do
kind of
we have the ability, but we use it on
it's
a
with
regular
us.
basis.
Okay.
Everybody does. We just don't use it enough and we don't recognize what we're doing.
Is it like that
That most
wisdom that's kind of behind the, the feeling, the bad feelings and things like that, or?
Well, we could talk about it more from a sense of nature, that when a child is born, the child naturally becomes joyous. Being alive is a wonderful thing.
It's like
Everybody
that
kind of
resting
knows
state.
being
Yeah.
alive is a wonderful thing. That's one of the reasons why we cling to life so desperately,
Mm.
is because we recognize it's nice. It's really nice to be alive.
Yeah.
But then people wind up being in a state of danger because the self preservation instinct is saying, well, if it's so important to be alive, I've got to keep doing it, which means I've got to make sure that I stay alive. And so our self preservation instinct will then give us a lot of false positives. We become afraid when in fact there's no reason to be afraid. A recent example was about 3 days ago, the laptop died. It's only a year old and it just flat out
Oh no.
died. Took it to the dealer took it apart and it's full of ants.
Ugh.
But the important point here is that it was a laptop that died, not me.
So is
I
it kind of
didn't
like
die. It
the
was the
natural
laptop
state?
that died. Huh?
It's kind of like the natural state is enlightenment, and then there's like conditioning on top of it that kind of pulls us
Yeah, and
away
then
from
the
that.
conditioning, my laptop. And now when my laptop dies, something in me dies too. And we begin to have fear and anxiety and what am I going to do without the laptop? Well, I'm fine without that laptop. I'm probably better off without it.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish. Yeah, I know what you mean.
But we
Yeah,
attach
that's
ourselves to things and then we feel miserable because everything is a state of flux. If we like something the way it is and it changes, then we're going to be in a state of not liking it anymore.
and so
So
then
how
rather
can we
than
find a way of liking things so that we can maintain that state of being in a state of liking? So
so
that
we're
when
kind
a laptop does die, we don't feel bad.
so it's more of like a relaxing back into where we were as opposed to like a striving for this like enlightenment that is something else.
Yeah. Relaxing into a state that's already natural and already there rather than striving for something that's magical and way out there someplace.
Sounds a little more attainable than how I was thinking about it.
That's the way it is. Yes, please see it that way, that this is doable. You can do this. But when we look at it from the Western Buddhist and the Western religious traditions, we put it out there the way that we put in anything associated with religion. An example of that is Christian is absolutely determined to teach everyone that they are a sinner. They have original sin. Only God is good. Who do you think you are? That you cannot do it yourself. You need a Savior. Only Jesus can save you. You have to go to Him to get salvation, right?
Yeah, he's like fundamentally different than everybody else.
Mm-hmm. To where if we recognize, no, Jesus is fundamentally just like everybody else, and everybody else can, if we would stop deifying Jesus and deifying the Buddha and start taking their advice instead.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for telling us to me. I really appreciate it.
Much of what Jesus says sounds very much like Buddha. It's worth an entire conversation to talk about how Jesus and Buddha are very similar. The point, though, is that Jesus was not around long enough to really teach and instill to his students what really he wanted to teach them. His ministry was cut short. He
Yeah.
also had no influence to where the Buddha had uh, influence. He knew everyone. He was royalty. And had a reputation. So he could go up to anybody. In fact, King Pasenadi and King Bimbisara both used the Buddha for advisors. To
Hmm.
where Jesus, wow, he walks into the temple and tears the place apart and throws the money changers out. The Buddha would have gone to Caiaphas and had a nice long conversation with the head priest to say, what can we do to get these money changers out of the temple and put them over there in the corner someplace outside? So Buddha would
A
have
little,
taken a different view
yeah.
and taken it because he had the power with the of his personality to where Jesus was a poor nobody.
Hmm.
But they taught the same things.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I'm Christian, but yeah, or identify as Christian. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. That'd be interesting for me to look into. I don't know. I try to keep like a mental divider sometimes, but
You don't have to keep that mental divider. What we can see, though, is that ordinary Buddhism of the ordinary masses is very similar to ordinary Christianity. The problem with Christianity is they don't have or never did have that noble element of those who really understand the truth.
it was kind of just the church kind of grafting onto it. They weren't able to quite deliver that. Is that what you're getting
Well,
at?
what happened with Christianity is it became magical very quickly.
Oh, true. Yeah, miracles and
That in fact, Paul, within 50 years, started turning Christianity from the teachings of Jesus into the religion of Jesus by promising people something after death.
yeah.
And then Constantine really came in and messed stuff up. He basically was with the Council of Nicaea, took Jesus completely out of Christianity.
Mm-hmm. Dang,
But
yeah,
that didn't happen with Buddhism. The Buddhism is much more like a diamond that's been encrusted, or better still, a diamond that's so precious it's been put into a very gilded box. And now everybody worships the box without opening the box to see that the real Dhamma is actually in the box.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I feel like when I look at the Gospels, it's just like mostly just a man being a good person and like having a good heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
To
so
be a good Samaritan, right.
yeah,
But isn't that the height of humanity?
yeah, I
That's
mean,
what Jesus is trying to teach. And yet now what you find Christianity is racist, anti-LGBT, we're better than they are, let's have a white nationalist America. You
yeah, a
know,
lot of times.
Christianity is really, really nowhere near what Jesus would teach.
Yeah, it'd be much different if he was able to see, or I guess like yeah, it's much different than the core teachings at this point.
And that we also know that Jesus had certain practices that were very similar to the kind of practices that would be known in Buddhism. Going into the wilderness for 40 days, for one thing, and praying all night. Now, when he says praying all night, we don't really know what Jesus was doing all night, but he was sitting up all night. And his students couldn't. They all went to sleep. They couldn't sit up with him.
Dang. Well, yeah, I mean, I've heard of like Christian contemplative traditions. Like there was for a time like people would do similar practices. I don't really
Called
know
it
how similar.
Gnosticism.
Yeah.
And in fact, that would be where Jesus would come from. It was the fact that Constantine was able to strip Gnosticism out of Christianity.
And that's kind of when it turned to more like magical thinking,
That's when it became completely
or like
magical.
completely
Now is
magical.
agnostic,
Mm.
because Gnostic means to know, and agnostic means we don't know. And Christianity is completely agnostic. Every Christian is agnostic. They don't know they're agnostic. They claim they're Christian. But an example of that would be that at a Christian funeral, there are no Christians there.
How so?
Well, let's look at it from the other side of that, and that is there are no atheists in foxholes. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Why is no atheist in foxholes? Because everybody in the foxhole is scared to death, and so they're all praying to stay alive. Therefore, they're all Christians, because they're afraid of death.
Oh, you're saying they wouldn't be if they were at the funeral, then they're mourning, and then that's like they're not
Yeah, and they're mourning, right? Everybody is sad.
they're
But
not rejoicing
finish the
or
point about atheist and agnostic. The reason there's no atheist in foxholes is because the atheists are too smart to join the army. Or if they have to join the army, they're going to find something that they do where they don't have to wind up in foxholes. They can be computer programmers or something else. Maybe.
I like that interpretation. It's pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. No atheist in foxholes because only stupid Christians get into foxholes.
They chose a different job.
So let's go to the funeral now. The reason there are no Christians at funerals is because Christians think everybody's going to go to heaven. And Uncle Billy has died. Yay, Uncle Billy, he's in heaven. Wow, I'm coming too, Billy. You just wait. Nobody has that kind of mentality. No. What happens at a funeral is whoever is most attached to the person who's died, the wife or the husband or the father or the daughter or whatever like that, they are doing the most grieving. And so they're setting the stage for grief. And so everybody at a funeral is in a state of grief, a state of loss, a state of not being Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Yeah, I
real
mean,
Christianity. If they are Christian, it's a very low class Christianity.
it'd be a party instead.
It
Yeah,
should be a party. It should be a wake. Everybody gets drunk and celebrates how wonderful Billy's life was.
that's what my dad always says he wants, but
Didn't
I
let
don't
him
know.
have it.
Yeah,
Promise him that. Yeah, we're going to give you a send off. We're
get some
going to
fireworks.
celebrate your life. But they
My
don't. They
family
don't
would be, yeah.
celebrate life. They all get really sad. So, back to what we're talking about
Yes, sir.
is that each individual person at that funeral has a choice about how they're going to feel, and almost all of them choose to feel the way everybody else is feeling, which is being in that animal state, to go along to get along. They're all in an animal world, in that grief. Oh, we're sad and everything.
Hmm.
So we'll talk more about herding instincts, and in fact, all of the instincts, because it's our instinctual nature that both, number one, keeps us alive, and number two, keeps us dissatisfied. If we use wisdom rather than instincts, then we can use wisdom to keep ourselves alive, and number two, we can use wisdom to feel the way we want to feel.
That's, yeah.
We have to break some old habits
Okay.
because we're in the habit of operating out of instinct, and that the human brain, the frontal cortex that humans have, takes up a lot of energy. It takes a lot of juice. It takes a lot of calories. In fact, they've proven now, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that for any general individual person throughout the day, 70% of the calories he burns comes right off the top of his head. And yet, look at the industries that have to do with exercise to lose weight. And they ump and they pump and they all do all of that kind of stuff, and they burn what, 400 calories?
You said 70%?
Yeah,
Dang,
70% of
that's
all of
intense.
the
Yeah.
calories you burn is burned with the brain,
Hmm.
which means if we're waking up and we're breathing deeply, then we're actually burning a lot of calories. And by doing so, we're making this human part of the brain fully functional and capable of work.
Hmm.
So let's use the example of the typical office worker that's in the afternoon, he gets really tired. Basically, he's not breathing. He's just sitting at his desk in a kind of a dull state, not breathing. And so he gets up and goes for a drink of water. By getting up and walking, he begins to breathe better. He comes back and he sits down, and now for about 5 or 10 minutes, he can actually get some work done. But then he goes back into that state of drowsiness again because he's not breathing.
Dang, that's why it takes so many water breaks.
Right. So take a lot of water breaks, or better still, remember to take a breath, to deep breathe, and that way we'll begin to keep that part of the brain open. But the point, though, is that how are you going to remember to take a deep breath if you don't remember to take a deep breath? That remembering to take the deep breath, that sati, that's the skill that we need to be developing.
Hmm.
Taking the deep breath is just enough effort. You have to wake up enough to be able to take the effort to take a deep breath. But at the same time, we want to wake up enough so that we can take the right effort, so that we can change the way that we're thinking and change our feelings. I see you, Mara. Out you go. I'm not thinking about that problem anymore. I'm thinking about this present moment right now. And so
And
that
so,
then leads us into working with the body, working with the feelings to begin to feel good, and working with the mind to wake it up, make it fit for work.
hmm
And this is the practice then of Anapanasati. And if you'll recollect on some of the books that you've read, that you don't see this particular point or these points that I'm making, that they make other points. They don't stress the breathing, for instance, and they don't stress the joy, to cultivate the joy, to
yeah,
begin
I
to
mean,
like what we're doing.
I've been trying to take a couple like deep breaths, like as you say, I'm like, oh yeah, I should remember to breathe, and it feels good. It feels nice. I mean, yeah, it is strange. Like I've never heard that really emphasized. It seems Yeah, I'm not. I mean, like, yeah, I haven't really, at least for like this type of practice now.
Okay, well now we've got it's been about almost 2 hours, and we've gotten at least enough so that you can begin to practice more correctly.
Yeah.
And so
So
do this couple of 3 days and see how it goes, and we'll continue on after that.
wonderful. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You have no idea.
Great. Well, when are you going to call back?
You said 3 days,
Okay, we'll
or
see you in about
how long do you like a
about
week or 3 days or
about
whatever?
twice a week for the beginners,
Yeah.
and then
Okay.
down to maybe once a week, and then maybe down to whenever.
Yeah. 3 days then.
But
Yeah.
I,
I'll
but
call
really,
you back in 3 days.
this is more of a cultivation of a friendship, and that part of that friendship is also to introduce you to other friends, so that we can begin to network. And so that's why I want you to know the guys in Seattle that I already know, because
Yeah. I'll reach out to them.
we need to develop a sangha in the West,
Hmm.
because we don't have one. Every student will that comes say, "Well, I've been reading a book, or I've been reading Edit," but nobody comes to say, "I have been down to the local temple and I've really learned a lot from the monk down there. Do you know him?" Nobody says that to me.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be great if people will do that. I mean, I just feel like there's something kind of missing right now, especially like it's just like very kind of wrapped up in like teacher. There's not like an element of friendship a lot of the times, which I think everybody would appreciate.
Well, welcome, friend.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Well, we'll see you in a couple of 3 days then.
Yep. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye bye.